Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I am joined by Kunal Singh, who is doing his PhD in political science from MIT and has previously worked with various newspapers in India like Hindustan Times and Mint. Kunal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Abhinav. Thanks for having me here.
So, Kunal, we are going to discuss the relation, very complex relation between India and China and then America in between. So, let's start with the Indo-China relation. You know, we have seen that relations have deteriorated in the last 1 and 2 years. We have seen the border clashes. People have died from the both sides. What exactly is China trying to achieve by getting into conflict with India?
So I think China is one of the most important relations that India has. Um, so it's a very important relationship for both the countries right now, and especially for India. So what I, like relations have deteriorated. We see recently for like Galwan clashes and everything that's happening in Ladakh and otherwise. But I think the roots of this problem were like seeded long time ago. Like so, these are two large neighbors. Generally, neighboring countries do not go well with each other. Like this is a known thing that even Kautilya wrote. So and especially when these are two large neighbors who have great power ambitions, both of them, so their interests will naturally collide. And then India and China have a long border dispute, which has been festering for like 7 decades now. So to the extent that this relations was doing normal for a long period of time, I would say like trade relations were pretty normal and are pretty normal even as we speak. But there was a sense of denial especially in New Delhi, about the problems of the relationship. We kept thinking that we can keep trading, we can keep tackling the short term issues, and the longer term problems will take care of themselves. Like we can put the border dispute, for example, at the back burner, and we can keep talking about everything else. But but every now and then you keep seeing China creating irritant, especially on the disputed border. The the simple aim of Chinese here is to keep India destabilized. And if we had been like more open about seeing those things, we would have realized that they have pursued that goal like all the while. For example, arming Pakistan, helping Pakistan arm with the nuclear weapons was one way to keep India destabilized and confined to the South Asian region and not become a global actor. It's not that India is already ready to become a global actor in any way, but China has actively tried to sabotage India's case. For example, in the nuclear suppliers group, in the United Nations Security Council. So this, if we had, yeah. So not that India is about to become a great power, but whatever chances it has as a big economy, as a big nation state. So China has been actively trying to sabotage India's case, like not by helping Pakistan become a nuclear weapons power, by undermining India's case in the nuclear suppliers group, in the United Nations Security Council. So there was this roots of conflict, or a disagreement seeded into this relationship for a long while. It's just that we were not paying much attention to it. It was like our foreign policy also moves from one crisis to another. So we tend to not stare into the problems until a crisis hits, and that's what happened with Galwan, last year.
Yeah, so that's fine. The China is trying to sabotage India for a long time. Those are the games that countries play with each other, especially if they're large neighbors. But what has provoked China to come out so strongly against India? You know that China is doing almost everything to antagonize India more and more. Why is that? What is the Chinese thinking on it?
Yeah, so China is not a very transparent state, so it's very difficult to see and look into what the Chinese leadership is thinking, what Xi Jinping is thinking. But as far as we can see, the idea is to keep this, like, India a bit destabilized. And there's ways different nation states go about doing that. So what we keep seeing on the India-China disputed Himalayan border in particular is that they'll just make a little incursion. They'll not do something huge. They'll make a little incursion, keep India on alert, like the Indian forces occupied, make India invest into its defense resources for example, on the Himalayan border, like distract from its what it would invest in the Indian Ocean, distract it from what it would try to do in partnership with the United States and Japan and Australia in the Indian Ocean and elsewhere. So yeah, this is one way in which so China does not think of India as its primary frontier. Its main primary frontier is to the east of China, which consists of mainly Taiwan, the Japan, and the South China Sea disputes that it has with different countries. But the India problem is more of an irritant for China. It's like they want to deal with India with minimum effort, minimum resources. So even a little incursion is good enough to keep India occupied and distracted from pursuing, like, for the first time, India actually took a stand on South China Sea after Narendra Modi became Prime Minister. So and the India-US relationship has been deepening. Of course, China does not like that, and it will do. And there are different ways. So some nations, if China wanted to, it could have used carrots to woo India, but it does not use carrots. It uses sticks. It's the way they go about these things. When they wanted, like, for example, for Bhutan to do independent consultations with China on the border negotiations, they did not use carrots. They decided to, like, send the troops into Doklam to build a road. So this is how Chinese leadership, the force is right, might is right behavior, and it also has to do with the Chinese power. Over the last 3 decades, 4 decades, China has grown into a big, awesome power. And the military difference between India and China is, like, huge right now. And that's why it doesn't think that it has to use carrots to woo India, or it has anything to lose by alienating India. So keep it disturbed, keep it distracted, destabilized, and then so that it's not, coming in your way while you do your things on the eastern border. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but where does Pakistan fits into the entire equation? Because we're seeing that the relation between Pakistan and China are very strong now. In fact, large part of the northern Pakistan and also Pakistan occupied Kashmir is now effectively under Chinese control. And then also the Gwadar port. How do you see the Pakistan game plan here? What they're trying to do? Of course, obvious thing is that they're happy that China is doing something against India. But Pakistanis must be also thinking what China is doing. And I'm pretty sure they also have lots of apprehensions about China.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because it often gets neglected, So we need to look at how Pakistan has seen, its relations with the great power over the years. So even as during the Cold War, when Pakistan became a US ally and it became a part of, the CENTO and CETO, two prominent Cold War groupings, the US objective was to, contain Soviet Union's expansion in South Asia, in Central Asia. That was the US objective while enlisting Pakistan's support. But Pakistan was looking for something else. Pakistan was looking for American help in order to, attack Kashmir, in order to attack India. So in its designs against India. So there was a mismatch. And Pakistan has very quickly realized that they were not going to get what they wanted from the Cold War pacts, Cold War alliances. So it was in mid 1950s actually when Pakistan started reaching out to China, and this was not pretty much not very appreciated in America then because China and Soviet Union were in the different group in the Communist alliance. But the China-Pakistan relationship turned to U.S. advantage when Nixon wanted to open a relationship with China. So what we see is that China has always liked two superpower benefactors, not just one. So Pakistan wants two superpower benefactors. The reason is that if there is just one superpower benefactor on which the Pakistanis depend on, that one power will have a lot of sway because Pakistan is hardly an economic power to speak of. It has some nuclear weapons, which it uses like. It is said that in every country, puts the gun to someone else while negotiating. Pakistan puts a gun on its own head while negotiating. So it uses that nuclear weapons that it has. If I implode, what will happen to my nuclear weapons? So you got to be on good terms with me so that we take care of the region as I want. So the Pakistanis have been, in that way, have always wanted two superpower benefactors. And that is the worry that is now seeping in Pakistan. And because America is now more or less not that reliable to Pakistan, China. So if you look at the history of Pakistan's relations with China, they obviously helped in building nuclear weapons. That's true. But look at something else. Like in 1965, Chinese did not come to Pakistan's help. There was a lot of noise that China made, but that was just noise in support of Pakistan against India, but just noise. In 1971, when Pakistan suffered its most humiliating defeat, again, China did not come to support Pakistan. Again, just a lot of noise, nothing more. In 1999, in the Kargil War, China actually came to de facto India's support by asking Pakistan to pull away its troops. So it's the Chinese help to build Pakistan nuclear weapons is basically to say that okay, you are responsible for your own security. Now we will help you gather capabilities, but don't think that I'm going to come to your rescue if you start a war. If you are in a war, I'm not going to come to your rescue. So that worry is always in Pakistan's head, and that's why even as the China-Pakistan relations have deepened, and there has been whole the China-Pakistan economic corridor, most of which is like questionable commercial deals. Some with defense value, some with not. But Pakistanis have not given up on America. It will be a mistake to think that Pakistan has given up on America. It has not. It still tries that it has two superpower patrons, both America and China.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. But all these three are nuclear power, and all of them converge in the region of Kashmir. So I think that's a spot where three nuclear powers actually meet, who are not on good terms with each other. So let me ask you, what is the nuclear doctrine of India and China? What is their posture when it comes to the nuclear weapons?
Pretty similar actually. Both India and China do not depend too much on their nuclear weapons. They have nuclear weapons, but the number of the force size is pretty small. India has something like 150 nuclear warheads. China has, I don't know the exact number, but something around the range of 300. Not huge size, especially for a country of China's size and power and capability. At the peak of Cold War, the US and Soviet Union had something like 15,000 nuclear warheads each. So China doesn't depend on, and there was this Mao's view on nuclear weapon was that nuclear weapon is a paper tiger. It's not very useful. So, but Mao being Mao, so but like even from Mao to Deng to subsequent leadership, if you see, there's some consistent theme in Chinese leadership thinking on nuclear weapons. They don't think of nuclear weapons as very important role. They don't think of nuclear weapons as offensive role, to start a war. So if there is one country which has like the best, say, no first use policy, it's China, because China doesn't seem to rely on its nuclear weapons for offensive purposes. It no first use policy in particular is just it's just word written on a paper, so it can be discarded at any time. It's not that important. But if some country tries to adhere to it to maximum, that China is one of them. Like, so China has a no first use policy. It has a small nuclear arsenal, and it does not see much use of nuclear weapons even in its near field theater. It has a very small, submarine fleet, just 4 SSBNs as of now, most of which are not very technologically capable. Like, the moment they go out into the sea, they'll be very vulnerable to attacks by American attack submarines. So it depends mostly on its land-based ICBM missiles. So that is where the China's nuclear posture right now is. As far as India is concerned, India has a no first use policy on paper, which has now been disputed. Even ministers have made remarks that, for example, Rajnath Singh said that we have no first use till the day we have it, and then we don't know. So something to that effect. So if you're sitting ministers like question your own no first use policy, you cannot blame other people questioning your no first use policy. So that but India also has a very small nuclear arsenal. Right now, it has only one nuclear submarine, nuclear ballistic missile submarine, which is Arihant. Which it's not a very good boat, to be honest. Its endurance and range is not very high. The missile range is just 750 kilometers as of now, but we have K4 missiles, which is 3,500 kilometers range. So that should soon be, fitted into the missile tubes of Arihant. And the next submarine is also due very soon to join the service. If it hasn't joined already, because I keep like Googling every now and then when is Arihant joining the Indian force, but we don't know. Like, there's no recent news of what is happening on that. But it's due to join very soon. I think COVID has delayed some of those plans. So India depends mostly again on its in land-based missiles and air-delivered nuclear weapons. So if now that it has capability, especially in land-based missiles, to reach Beijing and Shanghai distance centers after Agni 5, after India gets K4 in its submarine, it can target I think one of Beijing and Shanghai, not both, from the Bay of Bengal region. So that is where now India's nuclear posture is. There are 2 or 3 controversial stuff about India's nuclear posture. One I have already discussed is no first use. Another is massive retaliation. India says that even if you launch a small nuclear attack on my forces anywhere in the world, I will retaliate massively. Now, that is a bit, less credible, because the Pakistan is threatened with the use of what is called Nasser, that they have a short range, 70 kilometer range missiles, which they will supposedly use on Indian troops within Pakistan itself, So that's like, we are sitting on a range of questions where if that gets, like, if something like cold start doctrine, in which the Indian troops have invaded Pakistan and Pakistan happens to use a battlefield nuclear weapons on those troops, in which, like, let's say 50 or 100 Indian soldiers die, is it good enough to destroy Karachi for that? Like, that's not very credible threat. If your 100 soldiers have died, will you go and destroy Lahore or Karachi for that? So not very credible. So that is the second part of Indian nuclear doctrine, which is, I think, should be revised, should be thought upon more, this whole thing that nuclear doctrines are set in stone is not a good look for me. You should constantly revise it based on.
What do you think should be the revised Indian nuclear doctrine? What points would you like to see there?
Yes, so I would like it to be more proportional. So if if Pakistan is using battlefield nuclear weapons, India doesn't say that it uses battlefield nuclear weapons, but you could go for more proportional attacks. It's not necessarily that you have to threaten, annihilation of a city or two in response to a small battlefield nuclear weapon. And we are talking about very, rare chance events. Nuclear weapons most likely, hopefully, will never be used. But doctrines work in the sense that they set expectations.
Yeah, but don't you think if we with a rogue country like Pakistan, if we say we are not going to retaliate massively, even if you use tactical nukes, don't you think it will simply encourage the rogue behavior of Pakistani army?
So has it stopped? Has it stopped encouraging rogue behavior? I would ask this way: like, what have we achieved?
No. Rogue behavior in the sense that they will actually use the nuclear weapon on your troops.
No, but we haven't invaded in the first place, so we haven't given that opportunity.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That if you remove this thing, you are saying that we should say in our doctrine that it should be proportional. This is what you're saying.
Yes.
But if we say that we are not going to retaliate massively, even if you use nuclear weapons on our troops, wherever, maybe inside Pakistan, are we lowering the deterrence?
And no, not really, because I'll tell you this. Even if you write proportionate, you always have the option. It's your nuclear weapons. You can use them. You always retain that option. The problem right now is who is getting deterred. It's not the Pakistanis who are getting deterred. It's we who have been getting deterred. We are not crossing the line. We don't cross. Like in 1999 war, it was Atal Bihari Vajpayee who gave a clear instruction to Indian troops that you will not cross the LOC no matter what. And in subsequent, like most of times when Indian soldiers have in fact crossed LOC, they have been very, stealthy operations, which we have not acknowledged. We finally acknowledged that surgical strike, I think in 2016 after Uri. But again, that was a very small scale operation. It was nothing of the kind that could, bring Pakistani army to kneel down. Like it was not a punishment operation. It was a retaliatory operation just to make a signal. It was for a message. So I would just say that it's not the Pakistanis who are getting deterred. It's the Indians who have been getting deterred because we face all the terrorist attacks and we have not been adequately replying to them because of this fact that battlefield nuclear weapons have lowered the threshold of use for nuclear weapons. The moment we retaliate with anything, with our conventional forces, we fear, or probably the decision makers fear, that battlefield nuclear weapons would be used. And if they get used, it will be a breach, like first time after 1945 that nuclear weapons would be used on actual people. So that would be, and that would put India in a big spot. So it's not like, I think the effect is reverse. It's the Indians who have been deterred.
That's a very important point. Kunal. But let's say you have America in the equation now. So it's not a left triangle, it's a hate triangle, India, China, and America. Both of them like and dislike each other. Of course, both of them hate China, China hate them. It's not that India and America love each other that much. They are just, together because of geostrategic compulsions. Do you think that the Quad means anything or is just a talk shop?
There are two questions there about India-US relations and about the Quad. Let me just come to disaggregate the two. I agree that India and US are together because of, there's a convenience. But I wouldn't discount there are other factors, For example, people-to-people relations between India and the US is enormous. The number of Indian students who now study in America is huge. So I think it's Shiv Shankar Menon who keeps saying that India wants to be like America. It doesn't want to be like China. It wants to be like America. It doesn't want to be like Russia. If you, and I think he mentions that if you go to Gurgaon, what are the societies' names called? Palm Beach and things like that. We try to imitate America. If you see any corporate office culture in India, it's modeled on America. So everything we try to do, as much as we say, even the communists, the left which hates America, measures India, says that we need to be like America on freedom and liberal values and everything. So for right and left, the right, who are especially in the market economies, again look up to America. So every section in Indian society actually looks up to America. So I would not discount that, on strategic terms, yes, there is a convenience that there is a common threat, which is China. That helps, and that has been a massive help actually for India and China, India and America to come together, and some good leadership from both sides, from the Democrats and the Republicans, from the BJP and the Congress. The nuclear deal was signed between a Congress Prime Minister and a Republican President. So it has bipartisan, consensus in both countries. So that is a good sign. Now let me come to the Quad. So Quad is, I think, one of the most, discussed topics right now, maybe across the world. Maybe, yeah, in America, it is discussed quite a lot now in Washington, D.C. And there's always an air of disappointment, and there's a thing that, okay, Quad. So there is a mismatch in Quad. There are three countries, US, Japan, and Australia, who are allies to each other. And there is India, which is not an ally. So there is a mismatch. There's Japan and Australia, both of whom use American weapons. And there is India, which uses Russian weapons. So there Japan and Australia, none of which have a land border with China. India has a land border with China. That too disputed. So there's this disjunction between India and the rest of the Quad is just too huge. And that is why China thinks that India is the most vulnerable element of Quad. You can scare India out of it by sending some troops into Ladakh or things like that. None of the other countries face that, though China has tried to apply coercion to Japan and Australia in different forms. Like recently, it banned, I think, Australian wine import and things like that. So economic coercion is like a fair game, but the troops on the border is a different kind of escalation altogether. Even economic coercion, above economic coercion. So there is a mismatch in this Quad. Now there's a lot of literature about why alliances happen, why do they come together, what is the effect of alliances, and the general consensus is that an alliance is useful mostly when there is firm commitment. There must be credibility that if one nation gets attacked, its ally will come to the rescue. India is not an ally. There is no firm commitment from India to either of the other Quad countries or from them to India. So if there is a battle in the Himalayas, India will have to fight it alone. So does Quad do anything? Yes, it does. One, more than the Quad, I think the India-US bilateral relation does, because US is now becoming a bigger and bigger supplier of military platforms and weapons. For example, in Doklam, the Indian Army was pretty impressed with how the Boeing Neptune perform in surveillance of Chinese troops, and they're ordering another batch of it. So new and advanced platforms that you can get from America is a great asset. During any such India-China crisis, there is a high-level contact between intelligence officials of both the countries, and you get real-time satellite data from America, what is the troop level, where are they aggregated on the borders. So this is very useful, but it still is not an alliance. We do a lot of exercises together, so that increases both interoperability of the armies of the both countries. And now the all Quad nations do these Malabar exercises, which are sophisticated exercises in their own way. And all the navies work together, and there is interoperability. The countries can come together as a political alliance against China. These are all democratic countries holding similar views about rules-based international order. Again, there is this rules-based international order tends to hide many differences between these countries, as we saw that the US recently issued a notice after passing through India's maritime space. So there's a lot of differences, but in general, these four large countries in the region come together, project a political face. They're doing stuff like working on vaccines together, working on disaster relief, maybe working on democratizing Myanmar. I don't know what are they working on that, but there is at least a phase that they're working on things like this together. So China has some reason to be worried, but right now, not a lot.
Yes, but let's say you have China on one side, you have Pakistan on the other, then you're trying to make alliances with a country or countries which are very far away from you, like Japan, America, whatever. So, in the medium term, what is the geostrategic scenario for India? What does it look like? Because in the long run, we can't predict anything. But in the short to medium term, what do you think is going to happen in this Indian subcontinent?
I'll answer that. Before that, let me just pick that point about your enemies are nearby in your neighborhood and your friends are quite far away. So how does it help? So I think one, as I have said, it helps by intelligence cooperation, weapons transfer, and all those things, for example, is happening with the US. But also, for example, India and Japan are, I think, planning projects, development projects, infrastructure projects in Nepal, for example. So if you present an alternative to China in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, in Maldives, and if India and Japan can pool their capital and they can pool their resources and provide a real alternative to China, because Chinese have deep pockets right now and they're willing to spend. They're willing to buy off regimes altogether. So that even having distant friends but rich friends helps. So that's one point. In the medium term, I would like the Indian foreign policy leadership to be more forthright on that. Like recently, we have heard, for example, Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar calling out China more clearly than maybe after George Fernandez called out. So it's been a long duration. Someone called out China bluffs the way Foreign Minister Jaishankar did. But having said that, I am still to know what is the plan. A Foreign Minister still talks about not aligning with any countries, we cannot be, be seen to be with any. Strategic autonomy is a concept we still hold dear to. So I don't understand. So you agree that China is a threat, is a big power, is right at your doorstep. There are only 2 or 3 things that you can do. One is you can balance. Now balance it using what in jargon, if I use it's called internal balancing versus external balancing. If you're not going to ally with other countries, you are ruling out external balancing. So internal balancing means you are building your own military power, which is not looking good. Military budgets are not increasing over the years. Most of what is being allotted goes into salaries and pensions. So it's not looking good again there. So then what you can do is either become a junior ally to China, you become a subservient state. That's an option. It's theoretically that's an option. If you have no other option, you just bandwagon with China. But you are too proud a civilizational state and everything to do that. Then the last option is some kind of hedging strategy, in which I count non-alignment as one of them. There can be different kinds of hedging and you can do this. So, but hedging and non-alignment was very easy in the Cold War when both the superpowers were not sharing borders with you. None of them were at your doorstep. None of them were threatening you. In fact, both of them were trying to woo you by economic loans and credit and everything. The situation is much different. There is one power distant, but is friendly, largely friendly. And there is another power which is at your doorstep and is not friendly at all. Like it's a rival. So that hedging and non-alignment isn't really an option in this scenario. So you have to do some kind of balancing or bandwagoning. If you rule out alliances, you rule out external balancing. You're left with internal balancing and bandwagoning. Now, internal balancing, we would all love India to become a military power, like a big military power, but it's not, let's face it, it's not happening in the next 5-10 years. We were talking about the near term, right? It's not happening. Right? Because now we found that the health system is completely collapsed. You have to invest resources there. You will have to invest resources. It's still a poor country with multiple demands on, limited resources. So you have to spend on health, on education, on service delivery, welfare, subsidies, everything. Can you afford a good chunk of money for 5 to 10 years for building military capability, for building, for buying more submarines, building submarines? I don't see it coming. So it's a really challenging time. But we tend to, if I hear the leadership, it feels like they're not talking much about it.
Yeah, so India does face challenge. I think if we want to build military capacity, first we have to build our industrial capacity. That will also bring prosperity and higher revenues for the government, which you can spend on the defense. I mean, basically, we have to do what Chinese did. But that's a different discussion altogether. But thank you, Kunal, for coming today and discussing these things. Very interesting points like the nuclear posture of India is a deterrence to us rather than being deterrence to Pakistan. People normally don't think in that way. And other points about the Chinese nuclear posture. But thanks a lot, Kunal, for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation, Abhinav.
Thank you. And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can join as a member to support the channel if you like. Hoping to see you soon. Thank you.